So my name is Kiersten Kral. I've been a staff member here at RYLA for 8 years and attended as a conferee in 2015. Today I'll be sharing my story about my ongoing recovery through a brain injury with post-concussion syndrome, dysautonomia, and migraine disease. I'm 24 years old now, but when I was a senior in high school, I sustained a concussion while racing for the track team. It put me out of school for 7 weeks, and I was never back as a full-time student. As a 17-year-old, you begin to envision a future with a mere idea of what you'd like to do. For me, that meant becoming a veterinarian and continuing my running career. I had chosen a college that offered me a balance of both, and the dream was taking form until it wasn't. In our dreams lie unexpected outcomes, and January 14th, 2017 was the day that completely shifted my reality. I haven't attended college or gone on a run in the past 6 years, not because I don't want to, but because my brain's capability is not there yet. Today, I hope to teach you what it means to live instead of simply being alive. I'm going to play a 15-minute video detailing parts of my recovery as well as some educational awareness. Then we'll come back on stage to continue talking to you guys. So the educational part, which is about 10 minutes, might feel science heavy, but the reason I am sharing it is because it's information I wish I had when I sustained my concussion. I know you might never sustain one, and I really hope you don't. But I guarantee you will know someone who will. And in that case, you can provide them with this resource, either via YouTube link or the PDF shared by the QR code in your schedules, and you guys would find that under my name.
When I opened my eyes after laying blacked out for a couple seconds,
Everything hurts.
I entered an unfamiliar world, cloaked in fake familiarity.
I'd asked you if you could stand up, and you thought you totally could, and you're like, yeah, I don't feel too bad. Doctor had to catch you, and if he didn't catch you, you would have fallen down.
The day I hit my head, my friends lost me.
I have survived 100% of my worst days.
So much of this journey is on my own.
You know, we're all on a path of not knowing, and it just happens to be that my path has a lot of not knowing and uncertainty, and I just have to go with it.
Life is so tragically beautiful and amazing, and words can't really be used to describe certain things.
And I was like, I'm trying. She's like, no, you're not trying, you're doing. And I was like, you know what, you're right, I am doing. So, where's the doing? But I don't understand why your level of joy after success has to correlate to how big that success was.
1.28 miles in 26 minutes, and that is the farthest and the longest I have walked in 4 years. Growth comes when you're uncomfortable. And I was uncomfortable when I was dizzy. You know, sometimes it's so incredibly difficult to be able to see my dreams clearly. It's so incredibly difficult to think that they will ever become my reality.
Reading for 8 minutes is such an easy thing for most people to do.
I've got a lot of dreams, man, and I've got a lot of plans, and I'm going to do them.
For over 6 years, I've experienced a constant stream of symptoms and limitations. This meant I could give up and let it consume me, or shift my perspective and learn to build upon this new foundation. I chose the latter. Many people don't realize that concussions can have this sort of impact. I sure didn't. When I say PCS, I'm referring to post-concussion syndrome, or also called persistent post-concussive symptoms. This has been said to be when symptoms of concussion continue 3 months after injury. A concussion can affect all systems of the body, which I will explain more in a bit, but I first wanted to explain the sensations I experience. I feel a wide range of symptoms, from a constant headache since the day of my injury, dizziness, fatigue, eye and neck pain, blood pooling, low stimuli tolerance, and many more. Trying to live life with this brain and body has been quite difficult to say the least. It has taken me 6 years to be able to have enough tolerance to experience life outside of my house and doctor's appointments, and I feel very privileged to do so because isolation is something I became very familiar with. Even though these outings come with difficulties, the fact that I can do them, albeit uncomfortably and with management tools, is a huge accomplishment. To gain some insight, this is a list of things that have caused, or still cause me to feel an increase in symptoms. You can see it's a pretty big list. Activities like walking, standing, talking, reading, being in the car, along with many others, are still big factors today. But why are these symptoms occurring? How do I continue to recover? And what even is a concussion and migraine disease? As I go on to explain these mechanisms, please remember I am not a doctor and this is not medical advice, so please use at your own discretion. So to start, a concussion is a form of traumatic brain injury and is the result of an acceleration and deceleration of the brain. This causes your brain cells, known as neurons, to stretch and shear. As they do that, they are chaotically firing and miscommunicating with each other, causing functional disruptions and leading to symptoms. After this electrical storm and metabolic energy deficit, it takes the brain about 3 to 6 weeks to fully recover. In order to regain proper functioning, the brain undergoes neuroplasticity. This is when it tries to rewire itself by building new neural pathways, using other pathways to bypass broken connections, and/or making new neurons. Easier put, neuroplasticity means the brain is changing. A concussion is diagnosed by mechanisms of injury, presence of symptoms, and tests like eye tracking, balancing, memory, etc. There are a multitude of symptoms one can experience, including headache, dizziness, blurred vision, and nausea. What's interesting is there are 7 different phenotypes of concussion: cognitive, ocular motor, emotional, vestibular, cervical, headache, and autonomic. Someone could experience deficits in all or just one of these categories. When it comes to resolving symptoms, you do specific rehab that uses different exercises to target the dysfunctional system. Depending on the root cause of symptoms, you can expect to be in something like vision, vestibular, and/or physical therapy. But as you can see, there are more options than just that. There's a range of practitioners out there who could be used to direct your recovery, like a DO, physical therapist, or functional neurologist, but ultimately it might take a team depending on how the symptoms present. And when you're looking for a provider, it's imperative that this practitioner is up to date on concussion research and protocol. Far too many people have been misled, misunderstood, and misdiagnosed by doctors who aren't current on concussion treatments. If you suspect a concussion, get in with a concussion literate provider as soon as you can. Go to an urgent care ER to rule out serious damage, and if there are any changes in symptoms or sudden onset like an increasing headache, visual changes, slurred speech, etc., go to the emergency department. If you sustain a concussion during sport, sit out. Symptoms may not occur right away, and your brain is in a vulnerable energy deficit during this time. So, risking another concussion increases the probability for prolonged recovery and second impact syndrome, which is often fatal. I'm telling you, your health and well-being is way more important than a game or a meet. Unfortunately, there are many misunderstandings regarding concussion, so let's clear them up with some facts. 1. An MRI is not needed to diagnose a concussion. It only picks up on significant damage, and a concussion is a functional injury. 2. You can continue to recover from a concussion even after many years. 3. You do not need to lose consciousness to sustain a concussion. Only about 10% of people do so. 4. Concussions are treated with a combination of resources like functional rehab and symptom threshold activities. Prolonged dark room and strict rest is an outdated and inappropriate treatment plan. 5. Neck injuries, so whiplash, and concussions can mimic each other, so symptoms of dizziness, headaches, and/or eye strain can be coming from the neck, therefore changing the type of practitioner and treatment you receive. 6. You do not need a direct hit to get a concussion. Anything that can cause an acceleration and deceleration of the brain can result in a concussion. It's also important to note that not every bump, jostle, or shake is a concussion. It's believed a concussion occurs from about 70 to 160 Gs of force, while whiplash is around 4.5 Gs of force. 7. Symptoms may not present immediately and can take up to 48 hours to come on. 8. You do not need to wake someone every 30 minutes during the night after concussion, but of course it is important to monitor the concussed person for any signs of emergency. 9. You do not have to avoid all screen time post-injury. Stimuli is threshold-based. And lastly, number 10, helmets do not prevent concussions, but they do reduce the risk of skull fracture and more serious brain injury or damage. Now that we went over that, I'd like to further discuss two phenotypes of concussion, the autonomic and vestibular systems. The autonomics have probably been the most overlooked branch in recovery, mainly because its symptoms can be mislabeled as anxiety, which is also a prevalent condition related to concussion. The autonomic nervous system, ANS, is a control system that acts largely unconsciously and helps regulate bodily functions, such as blood pressure, heart and breathing rates, body temperature, digestion, and so on. It's important to know that there are two branches of the ANS. The parasympathetic is predominant in moments of calm and non-threatening situations, and people remember it as the rest and digest response, because it slows down the heart rate and allows your body to carry on with those functions. The sympathetic nervous system, remembered as fight, flight, freeze, is largely in control in moments of danger, stress, and physical activity. It brings blood flow to the muscles, and an example of its response is sweaty palms and fast heart rate. Imagine them as each side of a seesaw. These two branches are always working together to create balance for what you need in the moment. The fulcrum represents bio-psycho-social factors. I know that sounds like a big word, but it just means that there are external and internal components that affect how much stimulation is needed to activate each response. So, for example, a lack of sleep and a high-stress environment will make you more susceptible to a higher sympathetic activation, that fight, flight, freeze feeling, versus having a good night's sleep and quality stress reduction techniques like deep breathing will allow you to be more susceptible for a parasympathetic response, the rest and digest feeling. When someone mentions dysautonomia, as I did earlier, they are talking about conditions in which there are improper functions within the autonomic nervous system. One of the conditions under the dysautonomia umbrella is POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. This is when your heart rate increases more than 30 beats with postural changes such as sitting to standing, but the symptoms extend way beyond that. In general, symptoms regarding dysautonomia vary from dizziness and fatigue to headaches, fainting, GI upset, exercise intolerance, and more. Managing these symptoms can be a combination of tools like medications, extra salt in the diet, or using aids like a wheelchair. And, like brain injury, there are many different causes of dysautonomia, such as genetic diseases like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or viral infections. The second phenotype I wanted to discuss is vestibular. The vestibular system is responsible for providing our brain with information about motion, head position, and spatial orientation, and activates motor functions that allow us to keep our balance. To do so, it uses our proprioception, which is the use of receptors in the skin, joints, muscles, and spine to perceive the location and movement of parts of the body, as well as our eyes and inner ear. When there is a dysfunction within this system, one could experience dizziness, so feelings of sway, unsteadiness, vertigo, poor spatial awareness, and so on. It can make things like uneven surfaces, elevators, and being in water symptom-provoking, which are a few of things I experience too. And there are many associated disorders like persistent postural perceptual dizziness, also known as 3PD, which is much easier to say, and vestibular migraine. Okay, so the last topic I would like to touch on is migraine disease because it's one that is very stigmatized and misunderstood. Migraine is a complex neurobiological disease, and experts in the field will tell you that overwhelmingly the root cause of primary migraine is genetics. It causes sensitization of the nervous system and is not the same as a headache. There are over 30 associated symptoms, occurring at different phases of an attack, which can be extremely debilitating. These symptoms range from pain to numbness, difficulty speaking, light sensitivity, and so on. I try to say migraine without an S because the pluralized use insinuates a series of isolated incidents rather than communicating a chronic condition. People who experience migraine disease experience migraine attacks. Like many conditions, migraine lays on a spectrum, and some may experience a few attacks a year, while others may have chronic daily attacks. There are different types of headache conditions like chronic migraine, hemiplegic migraine, cluster headache, and others. Regarding treatments, there is no cure, but there are many ways to manage it, like with medications, lifestyle changes, pain reprocessing therapy, biofeedback, etc. Since I covered all that, I figured I'd show you a bit of what my recovery has looked like. My treatment plans have changed throughout the years, and it depends on what my body needs, can tolerate, and what our primary focus and goal is. I work with a team in order to cover all of the dysfunctions and do many different forms of rehab and use medications to manage migraine and dysautonomia. All of these things can take different forms, so here are some examples. Although I've done many different types of vision exercises, my current ones include using a special virtual reality program, timed reading, something I call flip focus, divergence cards, and a few others. My vestibular rehab has also been a combination of many things. Prior to being able to once again tolerate working with a PT this May, I did a lot of self-directed balance exercises using blaze pods and exposure to just walking around the house and moving my body in moderation like gentle yoga. Pain reprocessing therapy includes a lot of education, self-reflection, awareness, and retraining of my brain's perception of the symptoms I experience. And syntonics is light therapy that uses selected light frequencies that target specific brain pathways. I ride the stationary bike at least 5 times a week, and I'm currently doing a 9-month POTS retraining program, which is heart rate based, that gradually increases in intensity. I take 4 preventative medications for migraine, including 32 Botox injections, and needle warning for the next slide. If you don't like needles, look away. As well as an infusion every 3 months. I use GammaCore at least 6 times per day, and Cephalate at least twice. So much goes into rehab, it'd honestly be too much to go over right now. But I help manage these conditions in many ways. A few of these tools are trekking poles for walking, compression socks, a weighted blanket, and trying to pace activities throughout the day. Honestly, I feel very privileged to have the possibilities of recovery because I know not every injury, illness, or disease has them. I'd like to point out that the disability community is a community anyone can join in one life-changing moment, which is why advocacy and supportive accessibility is widely important. Disability is not a bad word, and it doesn't equate with being an inspiration. We all have the power within us to inspire regardless of our life situation and identity. And lastly, not all disabilities are visible. I feel very grateful to be here today, sharing my story with you. Remember that every brain injury, illness, recovery, etc. is different from one another, and there's no one-size-fits-all roadmap. What may work for someone may not help another, and even specific symptoms can express themselves differently in each case. Just how everyone's path in life leaves their own unique footprint.
Thank you guys for watching. So, as you can see, taking care of my body has turned into a full-time job, and every single day consists of working towards my recovery. Because of the dysfunctions I face and constant symptoms associated, simple, everyday things like showering or anything, it takes a noticeable amount of effort and use up my battery more than it would for someone without chronic physical or mental ailments. Recovery has proven to be quite slow, so celebrating the seemingly small wins acts as momentum. Being able to watch a 40-minute show or go on a 15-minute walk without being completely incapacitated by it has taken years to accomplish. You know, before I could ride 45 minutes on the stationary bike, I could only ride for 2. And before I could read a book for a few sets of 6 minutes, I could only read for 30 seconds. I highlight the progress I've made because it allows me to show you how far I've come. But without explicitly telling you where I started or where I am, it can be hard to grasp the severity. I often feel guilty for expressing the difficulty I've faced because I didn't have to relearn how to walk or talk or eat. But a good example is to tell you about a conversation I had with my concussion specialist. I was happily telling him about my win, about going into an antique store, and his response was, "And you didn't end up on the floor for like an hour or more?" And I said, "Nope, I still had a flare and symptoms, but I was able to walk out." And he goes, "And it didn't take you more than a week to recover?" And I said, "No." I used to be unable to tolerate a hug or someone sitting on the bed next to me because of the motion. I couldn't be handed something or make eye contact without feeling as if I was going to pass out. There were times when a 15-minute conversation with a friend would knock me down for days, and there were days where I could barely even speak with my parents. I still experienced a debilitating level of symptoms that affect every aspect and activity of my life. Many times hidden behind a smile. I still struggle to go more than 30 minutes in a car as a passenger without a break, or even speak to you all today without feeling a flare and symptoms. But I'm beginning to get me back, and it's a really, really beautiful thing. Recovery is not linear, and every day can be variable when it comes to the level of symptoms and what I am able to tolerate. Uncertainty is just one of the many things I've learned to walk hand in hand with. Change is something else I've had to learn to get used to, but it's something we all must learn to be acquaintances with. It's interesting sharing my story over the past 6 years and at RYLA since 2018, because I notice the differences in how I portray my experiences and what unfolds in my own perspective. Like I said, I tend to struggle with knowing how much to share and in what light to paint it, because I've gotten so used to living with these symptoms, and I view it with a positive perspective. It can sometimes widen the opportunity of misunderstanding. A journal I wrote in November of 2022 shows this idea pretty well. It goes, "I believe that one of the hardest aspects of sharing my journey is sharing the good. Sharing the wins and improvement is backed in fear of not being seen, in worry of the assumptions that follow a picture of myself appearing fine, great and better and beautiful and doing so well, as many tend to remark. I think there's a really odd balance in advocacy and transparency on one side, and a dismissal of others' assumptions on the other side. A side that wants to showcase everything that cannot be seen, and a side that is tired of fighting to be seen. There's a level of pride when I share something that paints me in a completely healed light, and a guilt that follows right along behind for not reminding people, hey, I know I look fine there, but I actually feel quite horrible. I've been trying to lean more on the side of, let me be seen through the lens of those who celebrate the beautiful layer of colors shown because of the hidden layers beneath. Not everyone views the monotony of people's lives as a celebration, but I sure do believe that there are deep layers hidden behind the visible canvas that brought them to where they are now. Yet, in contrast, you don't always have to recognize the depth to something. Sometimes it's just nice to be seen as that first layer, because it's something you've worked so hard for, or something you've not yet attained, but hope to be there one day. I think this excerpt shows the balance of what it's like to live with an invisible illness, and honestly, what it's like to be human, as we all can fight hidden battles. Infinite pieces of our lives are shared across the world, but ultimately, it's singularly our own. And I learned that that is one of the challenging beauties of our lives. We are the only ones who know the meaning behind each letter written. When we share it, people begin to relate and connect in their own ways. So while it may feel as if our story is invisible, there will always be people with similar punctuation in similar places writing similar paragraphs. That being said, it can be really easy to assume the reality of others based on their appearance. But by doing so, we immediately take the pen out of their hand and begin to write their story that we know nothing about. There have been a lot of perspective changes in my life, and one of the more recent ones is learning how to coexist with my body. Learning how to live with limitations, testing the boundaries, and trying not to let a single narrative write my future. There were moments I found myself in acceptance of, this will be my life forever. I used the words if, not when. For example, if I get better, if I can do that. And in a way, those words were putting a cap on possibilities. One, because recovery at times can feel impossible and daunting, despite how far I've come. And two, because I didn't feel as if I could achieve big things without being symptom-free. It's become easier to dream now than it was a few years ago. But like any other person, I still face doubts, especially when my days are a trade-off of, can I afford to perform this activity, like going on a walk, or do I need to do vision therapy later? What helps me through moments of doubt and fear regarding my future is the mindset of, why can't I? I tell myself, if I can believe in anything, why would I choose to believe in something other than my dreams? We are given these limitless minds. Why would I put a definitive end on an infinite line? Once I feel that crack of hope, my strength to believe gets that much stronger. I think what's cool is that hope can exist independently from statistics. You can have everything pinned against you, yet still have faith in a way out. You can be in a pit of darkness, yet still choose to create your own light. And knowing that gives you all the power. It does not mean it's easy, but it is possible. To me, setting dreams isn't all about achieving them and checking something off a list. It's about showing up and trying. When you set goals that reach outside of your comfort zone, everything is terrifying. Everything feels too big, too threatening, too much of a drop if you are to fall. But I don't think the people who reach these heights do it unafraid. They do it with fright coursing through their veins and doubts pushing to make their way through the crowded mind. They take these feelings as a right of way, as a gift only given to those who dared. They set forth on a path where they've never been before, because at the end of the day, those who try never actually fail. What you begin to realize is each step along the way is an experience you wouldn't have had you not dared to seek discomfort. Our ability to sit in the seat of awareness and be the gatekeeper and watcher of our thoughts is where we begin to harness the power to view our reality and create our own truth. This includes growth, gratitude, positivity, presence, confidence, and everything else you might want to cultivate. There are emotions in this dance of life that are uncomfortable to feel and ones we'd like to ignore. I think we sometimes try to keep our mind and body occupied and stimulated because we are afraid to feel these sensations, but there is room for them. For sadness, grief, anxiety, frustration, pain, anger, we must recognize that feeling them does not make us weak. It doesn't mean we are giving in and feeding their power. Having that introspection to simply notice them or explore their origin and characteristics is where we can learn to move with them and through them, and it's where we can learn to create a level of safety. Our mind is our home. We don't always have a say on who knocks on the door, but we do have some power in how they pass through. If we were to look at emotions as if they were characters or people, we might begin to view their presence in our home, our mind, as something we can guide. For example, doubt and negativity show up and walk right in through the front door. I thank them for showing up, maybe ask some questions and explore what sent them an invitation, but then show them the back door to leave. Sometimes they linger, but I try not to hold on to their presence or let their occupancy in my home feel like an invasion. I ask confidence to stay for tea, absorbing their unbreakable energy, and invite curiosity for dinner, listening intently to the intricate flow of ideas, allowing my mind space to expand. I hug sadness and dance with happiness. I breathe with frustration and anger and speak to fear. Ultimately, If I take the seat of awareness, like I mentioned before, I'm able to allow these emotions and sensations to exist while simultaneously choosing the ones I'd like to spend more time with. And the ones I put more focus on, like gratitude, positivity, and presence, the more they show up in my home. Another key to harnessing the power of our mind is presence in the moment. So much time is spent with the past and future that we miss the present in its most authentic space. It's really easy to spend the now thinking about the future, what we have to do, where we need to go. But when we do that, we forget to admire the life that's unfolding right around us. What could have been crisp memories become faded into the background. You see, the past can try to guide us, and the future can try to drive us, but only the present will create the action. I'm often asked, what's your biggest regret prior to your injury? My answer would be not recognizing the worth of a moment before it became a memory. Life is painted by the difference of beauty and pain, and it is everything in between. My life flipped upside down, and if I had known my ability to do things would be taken away, and that I wouldn't be able to experience a moment without the suffocation of symptoms, I would have held on to the sensations of what it feels like to be living and not just alive. I've learned so much over this journey thus far, and one of them is giving myself permission to feel lost. Honestly, I encourage you to feel a little lost as well, because it means there's an opportunity to find yourself. It forces you to be introspective and ask questions that you wouldn't have, to come up with plans that wouldn't have existed in other realities, to undyingly search for and create brilliant plasmas and pair them with the shiny dust you find along the way. It means there's something great waiting to be created. And being that we are in a life that's forever changing, it means there are constant opportunities for growing. I learned that joy isn't based on external factors. It's something we must recognize and cultivate. I learned that there is so much beauty, even amongst the most difficult of times. And if we don't purposely view life as such, we will get swallowed by the darkness. I learned you can be grateful by choice, not just circumstance. I learned to own my own truth, reshape my idea of identity, and understand that I am not just a label in a color-coordinated filing system. It can be easy to feel as if I'm defined by or obligated to the tabs I fall into. It can be really difficult to lose, even temporarily, a label I once identified with, like runner. But the past 6.5 years have allowed me to see that I'm more than that, and that these labels are meant to be evolutionary. Gosh, I would be lying to say that this journey has been easy, because it has been anything but that. But amongst the rough weather of ever-changing skies, I hold so much gratitude. I am in awe of its raw beauty, with rains of uncertainty glistening with drops of hope, thunders of new identities and burials of old ones. Wind-cleared fields now lay for seeds of redesigned dreams to be planted, but my ability to see rainbows and dance with the storm is no different than yours. I am not an anomaly. We all harness this power to live in positivity. I'd like to finish this talk with a story I once heard, followed by a poem I wrote that ties everything I've spoken about together. After I take a sip of water. So, it's a story of a little grasshopper and his master in a temple a long time ago. Grasshopper had to be trained in the deep parts of Buddhism. During training, the master took little Grasshopper into the back of the temple to a room which was usually kept locked and asked Grasshopper what he saw. Grasshopper said, "I see a pool." "But what else do you see?" said Master. "Go closer, but don't get too close." Grasshopper slowly edged towards the pool. His eyes widened. "I see bones in the bottom of the pool." But Grasshopper also saw a plank of wood stretching from one end of the pool to the other. The master explained that that is not water, but concentrated acid. And those bones are from little novices like him who fell in. "In 7 days," said the master, "you will have to walk across that plank as part of your test." He then brought Grasshopper outside to the courtyard, where there was another plank of wood, exactly the same length, width, and thickness as the one over the pool. But this one was suspended 2 feet above the ground on 2 bricks. Grasshopper began practicing, and after just half a day, he could run across that plank. He could do it blindfolded and backwards and even dance across it. After 7 days, the master brought him back into the room to the plank suspended over the pool of acid and told him to walk. Grasshopper could see the bones on the bottom, and as he walked, he wasn't as steady as he was in the courtyard. His knees started to shake a bit, and then he began to sway. You know what happened? I'm going to tell you later. But in the meantime, I want to ask you who you are, but I'm afraid this question wouldn't take us that far. We are born to feel as if we need a title. We grow up being asked what we want to be and are expected to say anything except, "I want to just be me." A doctor, a writer, a teacher, an artist, a one-word answer is what society expects. But what if I told you the possibilities were limitless? You see, we are not solely defined by the job we choose to pursue. It's like society wrote us a deadline and told us when the definition of who we are is due. But who we are is composed of a million things. It's like within us is a universe and all that it brings. It's unaligned, undefined, and most importantly, unconfined throughout all of mankind. Maybe it's the thoughts we think, both consciously and unconsciously, and our response to our environment as it's forever changing, both horrendously and beautifully. Or our journeys through the unexpected experiences in the way we live our life. Our expressions through honesty, empathy, and vulnerability, or the impact we have on those around us. Maybe it's the things that go undiscussed, like our scars that tell the stories of our battles through both familiar and untouched territories. But maybe, just maybe, we're everything intertwined like the title of a book yet to be assigned and a storyline not yet defined. But there are many people who believe they don't have a choice in life, and they couldn't be farther from the truth. We do indeed live in an uncontrollable world where tomorrow is not guaranteed, but within the unpredictable, our perspective is controllable. It's how we choose to see the world when suddenly flooded with anger and hate. It's our attitude when we wake and our ability to open-mindedly communicate. To agree to disagree, yet continue to fight for what's right. To smile in the darkness and continue to hope that one day we will find the light. To be grateful when we have nothing and patient when we want something. Circumstances of the day may not portray what we assume, but we can choose the rhythm of our sway when the wind beckons in the opposite way. This ability to realize a choice gives us a voice within the unheard and a will that cannot be deterred. I don't know if you know this, but it's proven that thought alone can alter the brain, because neurons that fire together wire together. So it is up to you to decide how you want to change. We must become the best versions of ourselves, rather than always trying to be better than someone else. I reckon we must be rich in life, but this does not live in money status. We must be rich with feelings and experience. It's about how much you laughed and loved, and all the times you failed but rose above. It's all the days you chose to heal from the things you did not want to feel, and the endless lessons you once learned that now tell you where to turn. It's how much of the world you welcomed within and how much to the world you recklessly chose to give. For all that is priceless. Listen, life isn't easy. It will knock you down and leave you bleeding, but you can choose to give up or choose to keep on believing. But we all experience life in a different way. So while I say you have an option to choose your happiness, for many that task is simply the utmost hardest. Depression and anxiety can quietly creep in the silence, which is why I want to shed a light on those fighting mental ailments. Although I cannot take away all the discomfort you feel, I know there is infinite happiness, love, and light already within you. Sometimes it just gets buried beneath the weight of what you're going through. Your symptoms may manifest in secret, but I know they are real, for you're not invisible and you are not alone, and you are more than a diagnosis on a piece of paper that makes you feel like being loved is conditional. I promise you, we all deserve love. It's a fact written in stone. So don't count yourself out or belittle your light. Don't make yourself smaller because they say you're too bright. And to those who try to dim their own flame, you are worthy of space, you matter, and the world with you in it is surely much brighter. Life can be so short, yet so vast. So we must find our why. The reason behind our words and the cause of the wind beneath our wings as we try to fly. This is living with intention instead of living just to die. But unfortunately, not many people are living while they're alive, and to their grave they carry regret of all the things they didn't do, because they chose to allow their what-ifs and doubts become a threat and let life slip right through. So, why do you exist? If you search for a purpose, would that be a guide for something you can provide, or is it an endless mission with nothing external to find? For maybe the meaning of life has always been just to be, but you can be the one to decide what that exactly means. You see, our power is hidden within those limitless confines. There are no real fine lines of guidelines telling you who or how or why to be. You see, that word me is created from cultivating your own reality, and together we can make a difference. But even as one, you are far from powerless. Get this. One seed can grow one flower, but that flower can grow multiple seeds. And those multiple seeds can grow into multiple flowers. It's as simple as cause and effect, and before you know it, your impact will triple. Just how one drop in the ocean is all it takes to create a ripple. You see that our space is constantly filled by the energy we unknowingly release. If we remember to disregard the negativity and share the compassion and kindness of loving peace, we can move together collectively. We all have our differences. Society puts emphasis on what we believe in, our gender orientation and the color of our skin, but there are a million things that beautifully shape us into individuals. If we respect them, they do not form division, and if we perfect them, we allow society to make the decision of how we are envisioned. Being different brings unmatched textures into existence. I want you to embrace your individuality. Take down your mask and face reality. But I also want you to put down your paintbrush and stop painting judgment on others, for it's not up to you to determine their colors. It's scary to be you, but you are the only you, and I swear that is true. So continue to chase after the dreams that were denied. Walk through the world with your mind open wide. And always, always harness your authentic truth with pride. So prior to reading that poem, I left off asking if you knew what happened to little Grasshopper as he struggled to walk across the plank. Well, he fell in. And you know what the master did? He laughed. Grasshopper began splashing around, but realized he wasn't burning. And that's when the master said, "Little Grasshopper, it's not acid, it's just water. We just throw the bones in for special effects, that's all." So, what pushed little Grasshopper in? Fear. Fear pushed him in, for if he knew it was just water below him, he would have ran across it just as he did in the courtyard. You see, in life, it's our fears, the what-ifs, doubts, and the uncontrollable that keeps us from reaching our full potential. But we mustn't let it. We can't let our struggles or society keep us confined. We shouldn't wait for life to unwind. We have to let go and exist undefined. And if we go looking for something to find, I hope we start with what's inside. So will you choose to see a pool of water or choose to see a pool of acid? Will you tell yourself tomorrow or next time or next year, or tell yourself today? Because if not now, then when? Will you choose to rely on others to make a difference or choose to be the difference? Because if not you, then who? And what will you think the next time someone asks? Actually, I'm going to ask, who are you? Thank you.